James Barnes Business. I am here to talk numbers. Now that it's all said and done, what happened? And is it in line or is it out of line? So I want to start off with top line numbers. If you recall back in December, I said there was going to be roughly, I think I have the numbers here, I'm looking up and down, but it's 103,000 votes. We came out to about 95,000 votes. So, a little short on what I thought based on history, but it makes sense because we had a enthusiasm lean towards the Democrat Party this cycle in the primaries. It's like a 5-1 overall, and just different measurements. But what is consistent and what is always consistent is the thresholds. We know who's showing up, and how they're voting is a little different. So for instance, I predicted 75,000 votes, 73% coming out in the primary. I said that in December with my analysis. We ended up having 73%. We ended up having 72,000 with 75%. So it's within range. It's higher a little bit. It's lower in the sense of turnout because we had a lot of voters vote and either sit out or vote in the Democrat primary a little bit. So we did have more than 72,000 Republicans show up, but some of those voted elsewhere. And I'll look at that in a minute. And then I predicted just based, and when I say predictions, it's based on history. I just what did history do, and pull that forward. I mean, I'm really not making any real predictions outside of just it's measuring where we're at, and then it really does show the difference in enthusiasm. But so you'll see the numbers are consistent though. We had 22% of the vote was in the primary came from non-primary voters, so that's consistent with what I expected to happen. And where I saw, like I said, because there was typically, I would expect about 5% of our vote in the primary to be Democrat vote, or somebody who has Democrat history voting in the Republican primary. That's typical. But that being said, with the enthusiasm on the Republican side, we didn't get as big a numbers turn out in that area. So 2% you'll see. So that doesn't make up the difference, but so there was just a lower turnout overall. Well, it's hard to say it that way. There was an enthusiasm, but in fact, let's jump into the other numbers here. So these are the high level numbers here. Like I said, you'll notice they're pretty much consistent with what I expected. So as a Republican, a candidate-centric focus, I would tell them that, 75%, 73 to 75% of your vote would come out of your Republican primary voters. And so as you're developing your strategy, you would put a lot of your energy there, and you would put maybe 5% of your energy in finding Democrat voters and so on and so on. A different strategy. I don't want to get into that too much, but this tells you that we know who is showing up. And so we were right. We didn't get the right numbers because enthusiasm levels are different, but we know who they are. And so I want to jump into this kind of like showing you a little more, kind of breaking out. Like if you recall, which I don't know if you watched it or not, but I ran through these numbers in December right here, and those were my predictions based on, once again, history. And I love this because, like, once again, candidate focused is like if you look at super voters here, 45% of turnout was what I predicted in the Republican primary would be from super voters. So where are you going to put your money is that's a big chunk. It's almost 50% of everybody will be a super voter. So that would be an area I would focus with my mailers and my phone calls and trying to make sure they're voting for me. And then if you look here, then also what I predicted was 20% of the vote would come out of your high value voters. And so and roughly you see the numbers. I said what I predicted that would show up. And then, of course, the opportunity voters, I said 8% is what I called into that. And so actually, I have those numbers right here. Let me see if I could find them. I'll put them up here for you, but I have on paper for me. Let me see here. Let me just, before I go there, let me just like look at it this way. We know that in the Republican primary, we actually had 46% of the turnout ended up being, no, right here, yeah. 46% of the turnout was uh, super voters. And so if you were to take the super voters and then you were to take the high value voters and combine them together, that was what is that, 66%, 2/3 of your vote came from that category alone. And those are voters you could easily identify. You can easily knock on their doors, easily target them, and they're showing up. In fact, 75% of turnout on the super voters. So yeah, you might have had 11% turnout or 5% turnout overall in the voter population, but amongst super voters, 75% of them showed up. Amongst the high value voters, 42% of them showed up. So if you're spending money on those folks in the primary, that was the right person to talk to, and you knew because you're spending your money wisely, focused on, and I have different strategies. I'll stay out of that. But anyway, and then also you have on the opportunity voters, a 21% turnout in the opportunity voters. And so those would be altogether, what do we say, numbers? I said 66 plus 10%, 76%, or 75, let's say, call it 75% of your vote was Republican ID'd primary voters. Then you had 22% coming out of the new non-ID'd voters who haven't voted in a primary before. So that's pretty much where all your voters came from. And then you had a few percent, like two and change percent, come out of your Democrat primary voters, which you have right here. And so we know, like I said, when somebody hires me, what I show them is where the voters are going to come from. So like if you have $100, where are you going to spend the $100? You could spend it if if you want to spend it wisely, you could spend it on the ones that are showing up. If you don't want to spend it unwisely, go chase some people who might or may not show up. And I always give an example. Your money can get change, but it gets you very little bit change. It's like diminishing returns. I think Beto, when he ran, they spent a lot of money, 25 million, I think, targeting into the Republican voters, and that got them a chump change of 3%. I'm making these numbers up. It wasn't a lot, but I know that they spent about 25 to get about 3, and they still lost. And so they tried to squeeze forward in that area, and then we could do that too. You could make the difference in some of those areas. But so let me see, what else do I have here to tell you that is super, super important? Okay, well, here's an example. 54% of Republican IDs showed up. So there's 150,000 Republican IDs. I expected 75,000 to show up, but we ended up having actually more than that, because we had about 81 show up. But here's the key. Here's the kicker. Some of them voted in the Democrat primary. So they showed up like I expected them to show up, at the rates I expected them to show up at. But then some of them decided they were going to go vote in the Democrat primary. And that's not necessarily, that they left the party. Maybe they voted for a friend or something. That's very possible sometimes. Or maybe there's a few of them that did leave the party. But I suspect that if we continue to talk to them, they'll be reasonable and vote our way, because that's what they've always done. They were super voters before, Republican super voters, and for some reason they maybe went over and voted in the Democrat primary, but I don't think we lost them. I think we can still talk to them. And that's one of the tasks I think we have as strategies. Like, where are you going? Why are you going there? And what happened? And most of it's going to be a friend or something. We've got work to do in some areas, but for the most part, it's not giant numbers that we can't work through. So, but if you strip away just the voters who voted in the Republican primary, that had Republican IDs, only 48% turnout. So we only got about half of, we got more than half. We got half of them vote in the Republican primary, about 48%. 6% voted in Democrat primary. And of course, we had a bunch of people sit out and not vote. I think we had 46% of the voters just not vote. And so that's what leaves us, 46% is the number. And so So, the enthusiasm wasn't there. And on the other side, on the Democrat side, they had a way better turnout threshold with their folks. But that's because they have enthusiasm. They had some interesting people on the ticket. I think that was a big part of it here in Texas and San Antonio. They were all excited. And so, these numbers, like I said, they proved themselves out. Like I said, what's exciting is that we know who's going to vote going into this. So if like basically what I'm saying is, we knew who was going to vote going into this. We knew how they were going to vote to some extent. You can't measure the enthusiasms. They shifted this way and that way. That's why we need a better infrastructure to kind of make sure we're communicating with as many people as possible to see where they're moving and why they're moving. And that's what I love working with candidates, because in a way, I mean, when I work with a candidate, we figure this out because we have to, because it costs money to not figure it out. We have to know who we're talking to, why we're talking to them. It's super, super important that we understand, if you're going to be a voter that's coming out for 80% sure, or if I'm spending time with a voter who has never voted before, and I will tell you, your money is well spent with what works. And then, if you have extra money, spend it what doesn't work. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't even do that. Nobody has that kind of cash. So these are the numbers. My predictions were pretty much spot on, minus where they voted, because I said they were going to show up. They showed up, but they showed up and then they split the vote. Some of them Republican primary and some of them Democrat primary. And so therefore the numbers were actually higher than I expected, but in my predictions, like I said, but they kind of shifted with all of that. So anyway, that being said, I finish here with these are great numbers. I love numbers. So if there's something that you find fascinating and you'd love to understand more, you can have me call me and talk to me about it. Maybe there's something I can do for you business wise. And it's not just political numbers. I also work in ministry as well. I've got and also business. So I've got several different angles. All of it's data driven though. So at the end of the day, we do it per a system, or we do it per the data. So we're always working wisely, and I think that's what we're always taught. So on that note, Barnes Business, James Barnes, give me a call.